"You shouldn't be standing here," Marcus said, his voice low and steady, yet there was something uneasy hidden beneath the control. The private dining room at Rossi's restaurant was supposed to be quiet, sealed off from the rest of the city's noise, but the moment Emily Carter stepped inside with a tray in her hands, the air seemed to change. She wasn't dressed like someone who belonged in his world. Simple black uniform, tied-back hair, and tired eyes that had clearly seen too many long shifts. But it wasn't her appearance that caught Marcus Vale's attention. It was the way she looked at him. Not fearful, not impressed, just calm. "Your orders, sir," Emily said, placing the plate on the table with a polite nod. Marcus didn't move. Men like him were used to fear, used to people lowering their eyes, speaking too fast, trembling without even realizing it. Yet Emily stood there as if the man sitting across from her was only another customer. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his dark suit sharp against the dim light, his expression unreadable. "You're not nervous?" he asked. Emily gave a small, almost amused smile. "Should I be?" It was such a simple answer, but it landed harder than anything else in the room. Marcus studied her for a long moment, as if trying to find the trick behind her calm. Outside the closed doors, his men waited in silence. Inside, the distance between them felt strangely smaller with every passing second. Emily reached for the napkin beside the plate, adjusting it with careful hands. And that was when Marcus noticed something else. She moved with a kind of quiet confidence that didn't match her position at all. It was subtle, but impossible to ignore. "What's your name?" he asked. "Emily Carter. And you always speak like that to strangers?" "Only the ones who look like they're expecting everyone to be afraid of them." The corner of Marcus's mouth twitched, almost a smile, though it disappeared before it could fully form. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Not in years. Not in rooms like this. Emily should have felt the danger surrounding him. The expensive watch, the men outside, the calm violence in his eyes. But instead she treated him like someone who had to earn her respect. That thought stayed with him longer than he expected. Then, before he could say anything else, the lights in the hallway outside flickered once, then went out. A shout came from the corridor. A chair scraped loudly against the floor. Marcus's men moved instantly, reaching for weapons, tension snapping through the room like a live wire. Emily froze for just a second, but not from panic. She turned toward the door, listening carefully, as though she understood exactly what kind of trouble had just walked in. Marcus rose to his feet, his attention now split between the disturbance outside and the woman standing far too close to the center of it all. In that instant, he realized something unsettling. Emily Carter was not just different. She was the first person in years who had made him want to know more. And for a man like Marcus Vale, wanting to know more was never a harmless feeling. It was the beginning of something dangerous. The sound from the hallway grew louder, followed by the sharp bark of one of Marcus's men giving an order. Emily did not move backward. She simply turned her head slightly, as if listening for the shape of the danger before it arrived. Marcus noticed that too. Most people reacted to fear first. Emily reacted to information. That difference unsettled him more than he cared to admit. "Stay here," he said, though the command came out lower than intended. Emily looked at him, then toward the door. "That depends," she replied calmly. "Is staying here safer than what's happening out there?" Marcus said nothing. For the first time in years, no answer came to him quickly enough. A heavy thud hit the wall outside the room, and one of the guards cursed under his breath. The tension in the private dining room tightened until even the air felt expensive and fragile. Marcus stepped closer to the door, his hand brushing the inside of his jacket where he kept his weapon. He had spent enough years surviving betrayals, ambushes, and enemies who smiled before they struck. Trouble did not surprise him, but Emily's presence in the middle of it did. Another crash echoed through the corridor, then a voice shouting his name. Marcus's jaw hardened. He turned to Emily for a brief second, expecting to see fear, but instead she was watching the door with the same careful focus she had shown when serving the meal. "You know something?" he said. It was not a question. Emily met his gaze without hesitation. "I know enough to tell you those footsteps aren't coming from your men." That made him pause. He had not heard it yet, but she had. Then again, she had been the first to notice him too. Marcus signaled one of his guards to hold position and opened the dining room door just enough to look into the corridor. The lights still flickered overhead. Two of his men were down on one knee near the far wall, while another struggled with a stranger dressed in dark clothes, face hidden, weapon raised. The attack had come fast and clean, the kind that meant someone had planned it carefully. Marcus moved instantly. One sharp motion, one controlled strike, and the stranger dropped backward into the shadows. His men regained control within seconds, but the damage had already been done. The hallway was a mess of broken glass, scattered dishes, and tense breathing. Marcus returned to the room and closed the door behind him. Emily was still standing where he had left her. "You weren't surprised?" he said. "I was," she answered. "Just not by the part you expected." That answer stayed with him. Marcus searched her face, trying to decide whether she was brave, reckless, or something else entirely. "How did you know there was an attack?" he asked. Emily looked down for the smallest moment, then back up. "Because people like the one outside never walk like they belong. And because your men sounded too late." Marcus studied her in silence. No one had ever spoken to him with that kind of precision, that calm, that strange mix of distance and awareness. It was as if she could see beyond the surface of a room and read the movement underneath it. One of his guards opened the door, ready to report, but Marcus raised a hand and stopped him. His attention remained on Emily. He should have sent her away the moment the threat appeared. Instead, he found himself doing the opposite. "You're coming with me," he said. Emily frowned slightly. That sounds less like an offer and more like a decision. Marcus's expression did not change, but something inside him had already shifted. He had not planned to involve her. He had not planned to be curious. But now that the danger had passed, he was no longer interested in letting her disappear back into the ordinary world. Not when she had just stepped out of it and into his. Emily stared at Marcus as if she was trying to decide whether to laugh at him or challenge him. The room had gone quiet again, but the tension had not left. If anything, it had settled deeper into the walls, into the air, into the space between them. "You can't just decide that," she said. Marcus folded one hand behind his back, his expression unreadable. "I just did. That's not how it works. For most people, maybe." There was no arrogance in the way he said it, only certainty. That made it worse. Emily exhaled slowly and glanced toward the door, where his men stood in alert silence. She knew enough about power to understand that Marcus Vale did not make requests when he could make decisions. Yet instead of looking threatened, she looked mildly annoyed, which was somehow more dangerous. "If you're trying to scare me," she said, "you're doing a poor job." A flicker passed through Marcus's face, brief and sharp, almost interest. No one spoke to him like that unless they were desperate, foolish, or hiding something. Emily did not look desperate. She certainly did not look foolish. That left one option. Marcus stepped closer, not enough to crowd her, but enough to test whether she would move back. She didn't. "Then tell me what kind of job I'm doing," he said. Emily held his gaze for a moment too long. "You're trying too hard to look in control." The words landed cleanly. One of the guards outside shifted in the hall, but Marcus didn't turn. He was too busy studying the woman in front of him. She had a way of speaking that felt honest in the most unsettling way. Not cruel, not flattering, just sharp. "And what exactly should I be doing instead?" he asked. Emily's lips parted slightly, then closed again, as though she had decided he wasn't worth the full answer. "You should be asking why someone sent that man in here." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "You think I don't know that?" "I think you know it, and still don't know enough." The room seemed to tighten around that sentence. She was right, and he disliked how quickly she had found the center of the problem. The attack had not been random. It was a message. Someone had wanted to draw him out, unsettle him, maybe even expose how vulnerable he could be when distracted. But Emily's presence had changed the shape of the night in a way he hadn't predicted. He motioned for one of his men to begin checking the corridor again, then returned his attention to her. "Who are you?" he asked. Emily gave a small, tired smile. "I already told you my name." That wasn't the question. She looked at him carefully now, and for the first time he noticed something beneath the calm. Not fear, guardedness. The kind that came from a person who had learned not to reveal too much, too fast. "You don't need to know everything about me," she said. Marcus answered without hesitation. "If you're standing in my line of fire, I do." That made her pause. The honesty in his voice was rare, almost unwelcome. Emily looked away for a second, then back again. "Then maybe you should start by asking what I was doing in that hallway before your men found me." Marcus's focus sharpened instantly. "Explain." She took a breath, and for the first time since he had met her, Her voice lost a little of its easy calm. Because I wasn't supposed to be in this room at all. The words hung there, heavy and precise, as if they were only the edge of a much larger truth. Marcus understood then that whatever was happening, Emily Carter was not merely a witness to it. She was part of it. Marcus did not speak for a moment after Emily said she was not supposed to be in the room. He simply watched her, as if silence might force the truth out faster than questions. But Emily stood her ground, her hands relaxed at her sides, her expression calm in a way that made the whole situation feel even stranger. "Then where were you supposed to be?" he asked at last. Emily hesitated, not because she was afraid of answering, Marcus realized, but because she was deciding how much of the truth she could survive giving away. "Outside," she said, "near the back entrance. I was waiting for someone." "Who?" "That depends on who you are asking for." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "That sounds like a dodge." "It is." The answer came without apology. She looked at him with that same quiet intelligence that had unsettled him from the beginning. "I didn't come here by accident, Marcus." Hearing his name in her voice created a strange tension he did not enjoy. It was too direct, too personal, too confident for someone standing in a room that still carried the aftershock of an attack. He studied her face, searching for signs of deceit, but found only careful restraint. Whatever Emily was hiding, she knew exactly how to hide it. "Speak clearly," he said. "There are too many people listening for me to do that," she replied. Marcus glanced at the closed door, then back at her. She was right. The men outside might be loyal, but loyalty did not erase curiosity. And in his world, curiosity could be fatal. He crossed the room and set a hand against the edge of the table, lowering his voice. "Then give me enough to understand." Emily looked toward the door as well, then leaned slightly closer, just enough for her voice to remain private. "I saw the man before he came in here. He wasn't alone. He was following a schedule. He had a signal. Someone wanted him to reach this room at a specific time." Marcus's jaw tightened. That detail mattered. It meant the attack had structure, timing, intention. It meant someone within the building might have helped. Emily continued before he could interrupt. "I tried to stop it." "You? I know this place," she said. "More than your men think I should." For a brief second, Marcus felt the room shift again. Not with danger this time, but with the feeling that the floor beneath him had become less stable. A waitress who should have been invisible had somehow moved close enough to the center of his night to matter. He had seen many people lie, manipulate, and bargain for survival. Emily was not doing any of those things. She was withholding, yes, but not lying. He could feel it in the way she chose each word carefully. "Why help me?" he asked. Emily gave a faint, tired exhale. "Because I didn't want blood on that floor. And because your men were too slow to see what was happening." The bluntness of it should have irritated him. Instead, it pulled his attention deeper. Marcus had built his reputation on being the one who saw everything first. Tonight, that advantage had slipped, and a woman with quiet eyes and steady hands had noticed the threat before he did. That was not easy to accept. It was worse because he found it impressive. The corridor outside remained tense, but the immediate danger had passed. Yet the room no longer felt like a place of business. It felt like a threshold. Marcus straightened, his mind moving quickly through possibilities. Emily had knowledge. Someone had been watching her. She had likely stepped into his world with a purpose. "You know more than you're saying," he said. Emily did not deny it. "And so do you." That answer hit harder than he expected, because it was true. He had built his life on control, but control was slipping through his fingers in the presence of a woman who should have been easy to dismiss. Instead, she had become the one person in the room he could not ignore. "Then we understand each other," Marcus said. Emily met his gaze and did not look away. "Not yet," she replied. "But we might." And in that moment, Marcus realized the night had only begun to reveal what it truly was. Marcus let Emily's last words settle between them before speaking again. "Might is not enough," he said. His voice was calm, but the warning underneath it was unmistakable. Emily folded her arms loosely, still refusing to behave like someone intimidated by the man in front of her. "Then you'll have to decide whether you want the truth or just the version that makes you comfortable." That was the kind of answer that would have irritated most men. Marcus, however, found himself more focused than annoyed. He had built his life around reading rooms, judging threats, and measuring how people bent under pressure. Emily did none of those things. She stood still, watched carefully, and answered only what she chose to answer. It made her impossible to predict, and that made her dangerous. One of his guards knocked once and entered without waiting for permission, keeping his eyes down. "Boss, the corridor's clear now. We found one of the intruders in the service hall. He's not talking." Marcus's expression did not change. "Take him downstairs." The guard nodded and stepped back out. Emily heard every word. Marcus saw the slight shift in her face, the smallest tightening near her mouth, and he knew she was thinking about the same thing he was. If someone had gotten into the service hall, then the attack had reached deeper than a simple hit. It had touched the hidden structure of the building. "You said you know this place," Marcus said after the guard left. "I do." "How well?" "Well enough to know where people go when they think no one is watching." Marcus studied her. "That sounds like experience." Emily's gaze drifted for a brief second toward the dark window, where the city lights were blurred by rain. "It is." He noticed the answer came too quickly to be casual, which meant it was practiced. Her past was still locked behind her, but it was no longer invisible. "You're not a waitress," he said. Emily gave a slight shrug, almost elegant, almost defiant. "Tonight I was." "That isn't the same as being one." "No," she said, "it isn't." The air in the room changed again. Marcus could feel the shape of the conversation turning, moving towards something more important than the attack itself. Whatever Emily was, she had stepped into his territory with purpose, and she had already proven useful. That fact alone would have made him keep her close. But it wasn't just usefulness anymore. There was something else, something harder to name and more difficult to control. "Who sent you?" he asked. Emily did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked at him in a way that made him feel, for a split second, as though she was measuring his honesty as carefully as he measured hers. "If I answer that," she said, "you won't be able to pretend this is a coincidence anymore." Marcus's mouth tightened. "I stopped believing in coincidence a long time ago." "Good," Emily said. "Then you're already ahead of the people who want this to stay hidden." That was the second time she had hinted at a larger threat, and Marcus did not like the idea of being the last person to see it. He stepped closer, stopping just short of invading her space. "Tell me what you know." Emily lifted her chin slightly. "Not here." He looked at her, waiting. "There are too many ears in this building," she continued. "If I say too much now, it won't just be my secret at risk." Marcus understood what she meant, but he did not like it. He had spent years building an empire on silence, and now a woman he had met less than an hour ago was telling him that the most important truths had to wait. Yet instead of refusing, he found himself listening. That alone should have bothered him more. A soft knock came from the door again, this time from one of his men announcing that the car was ready. Marcus glanced toward Emily and then toward the hallway, calculating his next move. Leaving her behind felt wrong. Keeping her close felt inevitable. He had not reached a decision like this from instinct before, and the unfamiliarity of it made his jaw tighten. "You're coming with me," he said again, this time with less command and more certainty. Emily looked at him for a long second. "You really don't like taking no for an answer." "Not when I think the answer matters." Her eyes stayed on him, unreadable. Then she gave the smallest nod. "Fine," she said. "But if I go with you, you listen until the end." Marcus held her gaze, something dark and interested moving quietly behind his control. "Then start talking." And Emily, for the first time, looked almost ready to do exactly that. The black car moved through the rain in complete silence, its tinted windows reflecting the wet city lights like shards of broken glass. Marcus sat in the back seat with Emily across from him, both of them carrying the kind of silence that was not empty, but loaded. Outside, the streets blurred into long streaks of gold and red. Inside, the atmosphere remained sharp enough to cut. Marcus had spent years in cars like this, on roads like these, with men who feared him and women who wanted something from him. Emily was different. She sat, with her hands resting lightly in her lap, posture composed, eyes forward, as if the most dangerous man in the city was not across from her, but somewhere far beyond the glass. "You're very calm," Marcus said at last. "So are you," Emily replied. "That's not the same thing." "No," she said, "it isn't." He watched her profile for a long moment, the soft line of her face illuminated by passing streetlights. She looked tired, but not defeated. Careful, but not weak. Marcus could not stop thinking about how she had moved through the restaurant, how she had noticed the intruder, how she had spoken to him without flinching. "You really expected me to trust you," he said. Emily turned her head slightly. "No, I expected you to be curious." The answer was so direct that Marcus almost smiled. Almost. "And why would that matter?" "Because curious men make mistakes," she said. "They stay too long. Ask too many questions. Start believing they're the ones in control." The quiet certainty of her voice made him study her more closely. There was no flirtation in it, no attempt to impress. She sounded like someone speaking from experience. The car slowed as it approached a private residence tucked behind a high iron gate at the edge of the city. One of Marcus's men opened the gate and waved them through. The house beyond was large, dark, and hidden behind thick trees, a place designed for privacy rather than comfort. Emily looked at it once, then back at Marcus. "You brought me here," she said. "I did. That means you're already choosing to keep me close." Marcus did not deny it. That was the problem. The moment had already passed the point where he could pretend this was only about security. He had seen the way she thought, the way she noticed things others missed, the way she carried herself like a person with unfinished business. He had also noticed something else, something he had no interest in naming just yet. "If I'm keeping you close," he said, "it's because you've made yourself difficult to ignore." Emily's eyes held his, steady and unreadable. "That sounds suspiciously like a problem. For you or for me? For both of us." The car stopped. Rain tapped softly against the roof. One of the guards opened the door and Marcus stepped out first, straightening his coat as he moved. Emily followed a second later, and the moment her shoes touched the wet driveway, he saw the smallest shift in her expression. Not fear. Recognition. "You know this place," he said. Emily's mouth tightened just enough to answer without words. He noticed. Of course he noticed. "Tell me," he said, lowering his voice as the guards turned away. "What exactly were you waiting for tonight?" Emily looked toward the house, then back at him. The answer seemed to live somewhere between reluctance and resolve. "A man who was supposed to meet me here," she said. "And now I'm beginning to think he never intended to come alone." Marcus felt the weight of that sentence settle into the space between them. Because if Emily was right, then the attack at the restaurant had not been the beginning of the problem. It had only been the signal that someone had already started moving pieces around him. And now, with Emily standing at his side in the rain, Marcus understood that keeping her close was no longer just a choice. It was a risk, one he was beginning to want to take. The front door of the house opened before Marcus could speak again. A narrow strip of warm light spilled across the wet driveway, and for one brief second, both Marcus and Emily turned toward it. A man stepped into view from inside the house, tall and sharply dressed, his expression controlled in a way that immediately told Marcus he did not belong to the staff. Emily's posture changed at once. It was subtle, but Marcus saw it. The way her shoulders tightened. The way her eyes locked on the man as if she had been expecting him and dreading him at the same time. "You," she said quietly. The man's gaze moved from Emily to Marcus and back again, calculating quickly. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't make it," he said. Marcus took one step forward, placing himself half a pace in front of Emily, without fully hiding her. "Who is this?" he asked. The man smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "That depends on which part of the story you want first." Marcus's hand remained at his side, but every muscle in his body had gone still. He had seen men like this before, men who entered a room already believing they had control over the ending. "Start talking," Marcus said, "or step back inside and let me decide how this goes." The man's eyes narrowed slightly, but he did not move. Emily looked between them, and Marcus noticed that her breathing had changed, just enough to tell him the situation had become far more personal than he had first assumed. "His name is Adrian Vale," she said. The surname hit Marcus with immediate force. He turned to her, and this time the surprise on his face was real. Emily continued before he could ask the obvious question. "He's the reason I came here tonight." Adrian's expression did not shift, but Marcus understood at once that the woman beside him had not walked blindly into his world. She had entered it on purpose, chasing a truth that had been waiting in the dark. "You knew who I was," Marcus said to Emily. "I knew enough," she answered. "Not enough to trust him." Adrian gave a dry laugh. "That's funny. You trusted the wrong thing anyway." Marcus looked at him coldly. "Careful." Adrian raised one hand in a small gesture that was almost mocking. "You think this is about you, Marcus, but it isn't." She was never meant to end up here. Emily took a slow breath. You lied to me. I gave you information, Adrian said. You gave yourself hope. That sentence changed the air completely. Marcus saw the flash of hurt on Emily's face, quickly covered, but not hidden enough. So this was not simply an informant waiting in the rain. This was betrayal with a familiar name attached to it. Marcus felt something harden inside him, not because of the insult to his authority, but because of the way Adrian had used Emily's trust like a tool. Explain, Marcus said to her, though his voice was quieter now. Emily met his eyes, and for the first time she looked truly vulnerable, not weak, just burdened. I was trying to find out who was moving against this house, she said. I thought he could help. And did he? No, she said. He wanted to use me. Adrian's smile thinned. You were useful. That's all. The words landed with a cruel simplicity. Marcus stepped. Fully between them now, no longer interested in politeness. You brought danger to my door, he said to Adrian. And you expected to walk away? Adrian did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked past Marcus at Emily, and the expression in his eyes made the situation shift again. Not because of what he said, but because of what he left unsaid. Marcus realized then that the real threat was bigger than one betrayal. Adrian had not come just to deliver a message. He had come to measure how much Emily knew, how far Marcus would go, and whether the two of them together were already becoming a problem no one had planned for. Emily saw it too. He's not here alone, she whispered. Marcus's focus sharpened instantly. From somewhere beyond the house, a faint sound drifted through the rain. Another car, approaching fast. And in that moment, Marcus understood they were no longer standing at the edge of danger. They were already inside it. The sound of the approaching car grew louder, cutting through the rain like a warning neither Marcus nor Emily could ignore. Adrian's expression changed for the first time, just slightly, but enough for Marcus to notice. He was not surprised. He was confirming something. That realization made Marcus's eyes narrow. You brought company, Marcus said. Adrian gave the smallest shrug. You always did prefer drama. Emily stepped closer to Marcus, her voice low. There are at least 2 more men. Maybe more. Marcus did not look at her, but he heard the strain hidden beneath her calm. She knew this was bigger than a private confrontation now. He lifted one hand, and his men moved instantly, fanning out near the driveway and the front entrance. The house, once quiet and dark, now felt like a trap waiting to shut. Adrian took one step back toward the doorway, finally showing the first sign of calculation giving way to caution. You should have left when you had the chance, he said to Emily. She looked at him with something colder than anger. You lost that right when you lied to me. That line seemed to hit harder than Marcus expected. It also confirmed what he had begun to suspect. Whatever had brought Emily here was personal enough to wound her, but not enough to break her. That made her more dangerous than any threat Adrian could have sent. Marcus turned his head slightly toward her. You want to explain why a man like this knows your name? Emily met his gaze for a split second, and in that look he saw the answer he was not yet being given. It wasn't that she didn't trust him. It was that the truth had been buried too deep, and she was deciding whether this was the moment to dig it out. Later, she said. Marcus almost smiled at the irony. That was the second time she had asked him for patience in a situation where patience could get them killed. He hated that he was willing to give it to her. Another car door slammed somewhere beyond the gate. Then another. Marcus heard footsteps in the gravel, deliberate and spreading. His men were already engaging before the threat fully revealed itself. The night broke open in a blur of movement, shouted orders, the crack of gunfire, the sound of boots on wet stone. Emily flinched at the first gunshot, but she did not freeze. Marcus caught the shift immediately and grabbed her wrist, pulling her behind the shelter of a stone column near the porch. Stay low, he said. I know. She snapped back, then immediately leaned out just enough to see the driveway. Your left side is exposed. Marcus looked where she pointed and saw one of his men advancing too far with no cover. He moved at once, forcing the attacker back before the angle could be exploited. Emily's warning had saved a life in less than 2 seconds. That was the moment Marcus truly understood what kind of ally she could become. Not ornamental, not accidental, precise. Adrian cursed from the doorway as one of Marcus's men closed in on him, but before anyone could reach him, he disappeared deeper into the house. He's running, Emily said. Not far, Marcus replied. He stepped away from the column, scanning the dark edges of the property. Whoever Adrian had brought with him was not here to negotiate. They were here to box Marcus in, to force a mistake, to turn the night into a controlled collapse. But Emily stood beside him now, wet hair falling near her face, eyes tracking movement with unnerving focus. "Why are you helping me?" Marcus asked, suddenly needing the answer more than he had before. Emily did not hesitate. "Because I know what happens when powerful men think they can bury the truth." The words were quiet, but they landed with enough force to change everything. Marcus looked at her, rain dripping from his coat, the fight still raging around them, and understood that whatever this was between them, it had already stopped being simple curiosity. He had chosen to keep her close. Now she was the reason he might survive what came next. By the time the last echo of gunfire faded into the rain, the driveway was littered with shattered glass, broken gravel, and the kind of silence that only comes after violence has already made its point. Marcus stood beneath the dark edge of the porch, breathing steadily, his coat damp, his jaw tight with controlled anger. Emily remained beside him, still alert, her eyes moving across the property as if she expected the night to keep changing shape. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them felt different now, less like suspicion, more like a fragile understanding that had survived something neither of them had planned for. Marcus finally turned his attention toward the house. Adrian had vanished into the interior, and his men, if any remained, had either fled or been taken down. But Marcus knew better than to believe the danger had ended simply because the noise had. Men like Adrian never traveled without backup, and men like Marcus never forgot a name once it had been tied to betrayal. Emily watched him carefully. "You're thinking he'll come back?" she said. Marcus glanced at her. "I'm thinking he never intended to come alone in the first place." She nodded once, as if that matched her own conclusion. The rain had softened now, falling in long, thin lines through the light above the porch. The storm had not passed, but the worst of the immediate chaos had. Marcus looked at Emily, and in the quiet that followed, he saw how much she had been carrying before tonight even began. The hesitation in her eyes was no longer about whether he could be trusted. It was about whether the truth would cost too much once. Spoken aloud, "You were right about one thing," he said. "This was never a coincidence." Emily gave a faint, tired breath that was almost a laugh. "I told you that, and I didn't like hearing it." "No," she said, meeting his gaze. "You didn't." The corner of Marcus's mouth moved slightly, not quite a smile, but close enough to signal that something had shifted permanently. He had started the night as a man trying to control a problem. He ended it as someone trying to understand a woman who had become part of the problem and part of the solution at the same time. That was not a position he had expected to find himself in. It was not a position he usually allowed. But standing there in the rain, he realized he no longer wanted Emily Carter to disappear back into the ordinary world. She had seen too much. She knew too much. And perhaps more importantly, she had not looked away when it mattered. "Come inside," Marcus said. Emily raised one eyebrow. "Is that an order?" "No," he replied. "It's the first honest thing I've said to you tonight." She considered him for a beat, then looked toward the house as if weighing the next step against everything that had brought them here. The decision was not simple, and Marcus respected that she did not pretend it was. At last, she gave a small nod and moved with him toward the door. Inside, the house was quiet except for the distant sound of guards regrouping and the low hum of tension settling into the walls. Marcus led her into the main room, where the light was warmer but no less revealing. Here, away from the driveway and the storm, the reality of the night pressed in even harder. Emily stopped near the center of the room and turned to face him. "There's more," she said. Marcus did not look surprised. "I know." "No," she said softly. "You don't." The weight of that answer hung between them. Whatever came next would not be small, and it would not be clean. Emily had crossed into his world for reasons he still did not fully understand, and Marcus had already made his choice to keep her close long after it stopped being convenient. The storm outside would eventually pass. The danger might not. But one thing was certain now. The woman standing in front of him was no longer just a stranger with a secret. She was the key to everything that had been hidden in the dark, and Marcus Vale was no longer willing to let that truth slip away.